Our guests in the studio this morning are Elijah Bonyo and Clemencia Osa. Elijah is a director for policy, advocacy, and government relations at World Vision Kenya, while Clemencia is a project development manager at Brooke, East Africa. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Kenya's Biggest Conversation.
Good morning.
We have you in the show because we'll be talking about NGOs Week 2022. We'll talk about NGOs, what NGOs are, how do we define NGOs, why NGOs are celebrating the week 2022. But let's first understand the organizations that you represent. Elijah, you represent World Vision Kenya. Tell us who they are. I know World Vision. I have a soft spot for World Vision. They paid for me school fees a number of times in high school. Gave me some scholarship, some bursary. So, but who is World Vision?
Interesting. Thank you. I've met a World Vision beneficiary.
Yes.
World Vision is a Christian child-focused organization that we focus on humanitarian development and advocacy in Kenya. We work in 37 counties currently, and in sub-counties, we are in 87 sub-counties. We work with the children, families, and communities to address the root causes of poverty. Over the last 5 years, we invested close to 30 billion in Kenya to reach about 2.3 million children, and among them are beneficiaries in scholarships like you. Over the next 5 years, again, we plan to raise close to 30 billion to reach 2.3 million children directly and 8.8 million children indirectly. Thank you.
When you say it reaches the children, how does it go to the children?
Reaching the children means engaging with children in their communities, identifying their vulnerabilities, and working with children and their families to address those causes of vulnerabilities. For example, in food security and nutrition, we work with their parents and their communities to engage in farming to produce what we call food of nutritious value. When we invest in food security, we enable families to have adequate food, and then children are able to get food of nutritious value. When they get food of nutritious value, then we minimize what we call childhood illnesses or diseases. Secondly, we work with children and families to ensure that they access basic education. Basic education starts from pre-primary education to primary education to secondary education. There are those things we call school attendance needs. School attendance needs sometimes have to do with food. Children not getting food sometimes are not able to get to schools. So when we have food at household level, then children are able to get to school. Other needs include water, sanitation, and hygiene. When you get access to water, sanitation, and hygiene, then children are able to go to school. Those are among some of the things that World Vision does in this country. Thank you.
30 billion shillings in the last 5 years.
Yes.
And hoping to spend how much in the next 5?
Around the same figure the next 5 years, 30 billion.
So an average of 6 billion a year.
Yes. Plus
money,
or minus.
Money being pumped into the country, into various communities.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
working out on a monthly basis, and it's an amazing amount.
It's a lot of money. Clemencia, who is Brooke East Africa?
Brooke East Africa is an animal-based organization,
Animal-based organization.
Animal welfare.
Okay.
Yes, we are dealing with animal welfare concerns, and
Yes.
the animals we are focusing on are donkeys, mules, and horses. And we are part of a larger organization called Brooke Global. We are headquartered in the UK, and we have operations in about 13 countries. But in Africa, we are in 3 different regions: Ethiopia, East Africa, and West Africa. And in East Africa, where the Nairobi office is based, we work with South Sudan. We also work in Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. And in Kenya, we are in 22 counties. So what we do basically is ensuring that there is animal welfare. The working animals have their immediate needs are sorted, but also we have lasting and sustainable welfare within those communities, working with community members to change the welfare of animals and also to provide for themselves. So what we have been doing lately is, I think you've heard about the donkey skin trade. The communities that we are working with were able to raise their voices to say that the animals, when they lose the animals, they are not able to make their livelihoods. And so we've been intervening in that space, helping communities to come together and also to speak against that vice. Our vision is a world in which working horses, donkeys, and mules are free from suffering and have a life worth living. We also, our mission is to achieve immediate and lasting change to the working animals, donkeys and mules, and communities that depend on them. And I think if you know places like Mwea, the rice there they access markets through the donkeys. The donkeys play a major role. The women in the arid and semi-arid lands cannot access water if they don't have donkeys doing that for them. In the urban areas, you've seen youth who are making a living by bringing water to homes and to families. So those are some of the things that we do. We work with we work with the government ministries, the government departments like the Director of Veterinary Services, to ensure that the quality of service, that all animals, not just donkeys, mules and horses, access quality health by mentoring and providing a lot of coaching to the people in the animal welfare industry.
Right.
There's a lot that then you're doing with donkeys. And yes, we've even had a conversation on this show. Ever since donkey was classified as a food item,
Yes.
we saw a drastic reduction in the population of donkeys in the
Yes.
country. And these are some of the issues I'd assume that Brooke East Africa has been dealing with and highlighting and raising,
Yeah.
both at national level and at the community level.
Yes.
But there's a problem. When is the last time, CT, you saw a pregnant donkey?
Why don't we start with basics? When was the last time I saw a donkey? Start there.
Saw a donkey?
Yes, saw. When was the last time I actually saw a donkey?
Okay.
To see a donkey, I need to move out of Nairobi.
Uh-huh.
And yes,
or
I
you
do.
go to some parts of Nairobi.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Well, in the part of Nairobi that I go to, I never see donkeys.
don't see donkeys.
Yes. But when I was growing up and I look at the times I was in the rural areas, I saw many donkeys. Now, the question you're asking, let me answer it. Donkeys are an important part of certain economies in this country, but only in certain parts. And even in some of the parts that they're important, their uses have reduced with time. Because the same functions that donkeys performed, people have found either mechanized ways of ensuring that those functions are now performed. So if you're talking about the usefulness of donkeys, the area, my neck of the woods as I call it, as a young person, I saw many donkeys. Over time, those numbers have reduced drastically. So the last time I saw a pregnant donkey, I can't remember.
Long time ago.
I cannot remember.
Yes,
When did you last see a pregnant donkey?
a pregnant donkey. I can't tell you that the donkey was actually pregnant or not, but I get your point.
That's exactly actually. The other time when I was driving down to Loitoktok, so passing all these counties, Machakos, Makueni, see donkeys on the roadside.
Yeah.
And it's actually hit me. We've been talking about dwindling numbers of donkeys in the country, but do we have a breeding program for donkeys in the country? We know about goats, about sheep, about cattle. Do we have a proper breeding program for donkeys where you have donkeys and you can call the vet guy to come and do AI?
You're talking of donkeys. What about horses?
And horses.
Because
horses is possible.
it is possible, but when you refer to horses in this country, a horse is an exotic animal. I'm not going to drive to Makueni like you and suddenly come across
And
a
you
horse.
see a horse.
Yes, I might come across a horse if I'm going to the Rift Valley.
I guess the question I'm driving to, Clemencia, is there such a program, a breeding program for donkeys, to make sure that we are projecting in the next 20 years, this is our current population of donkeys, and we are going to grow this population of donkeys, or at least maintain the population of donkeys?
Okay, thank you very much. And I like the discussion because it seems like everybody is aware about the importance of the donkeys and the horses. What's happening is that there's a lot of research that has been muted, and it has, up to now, it's still technologically not possible to do artificial insemination with donkeys. That is because the lifespan of the semen from the donkey is shorter than the cows, for example. And so it doesn't work as easily. At the same time, if a donkey is working, then its chances of getting pregnant gets reduced. And also depending on how long they are working and where they are living. So those are some of the complications, and that is why it's not easy to have those breeding centers. But I know that as the world continues, I think technology will always have a breakthrough.
Sure.
So we are hoping that that is possible. But also, just like you said, that the population of donkeys has decimated, it is true. Because in 1999, when the census was done, the population of donkeys was 1.8 million, but now it's 1.1. So within the time, we have lost so many donkeys. We did a research with CALRO, which is a government-based organization. And they were able to say that the rate at which donkeys are getting off the market, like the population, is 5 times the one at which it is being replaced. So 5 donkeys are getting out and only one is coming in, which means we are really going to have a deficit. The projection at that time was that by 2023 we will not have any donkeys. Fortunately for the campaigns that Brooke and the other organizations, including ADWOC, which is the Alliance for Donkey Welfare Organizations, have done, we are able now to see that the populations are at least getting stabilized, because we have a lot of support from the Directorate of Veterinary Support and the Directorate of Veterinary Services, making sure that the abattoirs that are slaughtering donkeys are not able to operate until they put mechanisms to ensure that they can have a steady supply of donkeys.
As I listen to both of you and the things that you said organizations do, those are vital. I mean, offering something that, students, for example, children in the country would not necessarily have if you didn't come. Offering this support for work animals, which are very much needed amongst many communities in the country, as non-governmental organizations providing these much needed services. We're coming into NGO week. And that is what is being celebrated or remembered being commemorated now. As you see it through the work that you do, and we can start with you, what would you say is the specific role that NGOs have in this country, around the world, vital services, vital help being offered to communities?
Thank you. I think the primary responsibility of providing services to citizens is for government. And world over, it's citizens that put governments in place. And in Kenya, for example, our government has plans and budgets for providing services to people. However, some of these plans and budgets are not responsive to the extent that people would want to see. So NGOs, to a large extent, in fact, we may not just want to call them NGOs, let me call them non-state, because we have the state and then we have the non-state. Under non-state, we could have NGOs, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations. So we come in to work with the communities and citizens to do those things that government is not doing properly. At the same time, work with citizens to demand accountability from government. So the role of NGOs, in summary, will be number one, to complement the role of state, but at the same time, to ensure that state is held accountable for its commitment to citizens. World Vision, for example, the communities where we work, the first thing we do, we analyze state commitments. We look at government plans and budgets, and then before we say we are addressing any community needs, we address it from informed perspective that the government budgets and plans are not adequate. And as we do that, we enable citizens themselves to plan for their needs, put together their plans, and then be able to implement those plans with support from World Vision. And as we look at the NGO week, my view is that we shouldn't look at it as a week, because the work of NGO is an ongoing process, is a continuous process. So the week just provides an opportunity for reflection. And the reflection we're having this week should be informed by data from communities. What is it that we are seeing as evidence of NGO contribution? And that evidence should be informed by what citizens themselves are saying, as opposed to just what NGOs are putting on the table by themselves. So it's important to engage with citizens and ask citizens what's their reflection on the contribution of NGOs in comparison to contribution by government. Yes, to a large extent, government is doing much more than NGOs. That can be recognized. But I know that over the last 1 year, NGOs in Kenya have contributed close to 150 billion. And this 150 billion, what we need to be looking at, what did it do? What was the impact?
Sure.
So individual NGOs then need to be held accountable to demonstrate what the money was used for. And for us, as World Vision, we publish our annual reports at community level and national level, and therefore we're able to put on the table what our impact is.
Yeah, and you've heard the testimonials. I mean, Eric sitting here has already talked about impact that it had on his life, and I mean, my goodness, we would be poorer without him. Sure.
He's a beneficiary of World Vision.
And here it is, an endorsement for you right here looking at
Thank you very much.
What other things, and I think, again, also for you, Clemencia, what are some things that you can say that when you started out, they did not exist? And then here we are saying that it has been made better because of the contributions being made by these non-state actors over again, that without which it would be clear that we would be in a really difficult situation.
Thank you very much. I think one of the greatest things that the NGOs have been able to do is to look at the unique value that the people at the bottom of the pyramid are able to bring. Those are the people that are left behind, the poorest. Because if you look at Eric, for example, I'm sure World Vision did not pay for him school fees, and he was coming from a rich family. And we now see that because of that, he's able to sit here, and I'm sure he's maybe also supporting other children, or he's able to point their way to World Vision where he got help. So you can see that there's a lasting and a sustainable kind of impact that we are creating as the NGOs. You also realize that for me, the greatest thing is that the animals of Kenya were suffering. There were a lot of wounds. We've conducted a lot of surveys, and we are able to see that even the way the women are harnessing the donkeys, they are not putting the loads on the donkeys directly. They are not caning them as much as they used to do. The attitudes that they had towards them have improved. They are more compassionate towards the animals, and they are able to let the animals rest, but also get as much money from those animals as possible. In Kitui, for example, a working animal, a donkey, can fetch a woman 379 shillings, which those women were not able to access. So you can see that
fetch?
they've played.
How?
They work with the animals to maybe take stuff to the market. They also work with the animals to supply water and those kinds of things. And so they are being paid. So the amount of money they're able to make is average of 379 shillings, which actually is above the $2.
She owns this animal.
She owns the animal.
Okay.
Yeah, so you look at that. You also look at the ability to bring these people together to sort out other issues, not just animal issues, but their own issues. Some of the women have even been able to be elected as MCAs in the areas where they come from as a result of just bringing them together. So we are not talking about results, we are talking about impact. You can see that even the dignity of these people have been able to improve as a result. Yeah.
When we say that NGOs, the primary service provision should come from government, then does it also mean that when you have a vibrant NGO in a country, or a vibrant NGO community in a country, it points to a weak government? It points to a government that is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. When you look at 150 billion shillings, for example, that has been spent in the last 1 year by the various NGOs in the communities, is this not work that the government should be doing?
Not necessarily that government is not doing what it should do. If you look at our constitution in the Bill of Rights, the implementation of the Bill of Rights is basically what I'm saying, the primary responsibility of government. And that government plans and puts laws and policies in place to be able to provide services to the people. So when we want government to put the right laws and policies and plans, then citizens have to be involved in contribution to those plans and policies. So NGOs become the first component of enabling citizens to plan together with government. Why am I saying the first level component? In terms of citizen involvement, government is not doing a lot of work. So NGOs primarily come to help citizens to engage government in planning. Because we've seen a situation where government talks about public participation, but they hardly reach the people. So we still need NGOs to facilitate citizens' engagement with government from a participatory point of view, so that then the needs of citizens are properly planned for. And that does not require a lot of resources. So we're going to have NGOs continuously to work with citizens. In terms of service delivery, various sectors that government is intervening on. On education, government is doing a lot of work. On the health sector, government is doing a lot of work. But we are also realizing that not everyone is being reached. If you look at the education sector, number of children are still not in school, especially in the rural areas. Some of the reasons include long distances to schools. So NGOs are coming to do what it can at that moment to ensure that no child is left behind, and that at some point the government will be able to reach everybody. So we really hope that should we achieve a good development milestone, then the role of NGOs will still be there, but more of accountability as opposed to development. Right now, NGOs are doing a lot of development work, humanitarian response, and advocacy. But should government fulfill its commitment to people, the NGOs will do more of advocacy, just ensuring that government is held accountable on what its commitments are. And lastly, as I talk about the NGO week, one of the things that we may need to take note of is that at the community level, we have what we call citizens-led groups. And our constitution enables citizens to organize themselves. So we should be looking at why are citizens organizing themselves and forming groups to provide for their own services. This is part of an element of government failure to some extent. Because NGOs anyway, if citizens organize themselves properly and they're able to do things by themselves, they will not be talking about NGOs, but talk about citizen-led groups. So I'll be happy to see a day in this country when we have citizen-led organized groups and very minimal of non-governmental organizations.
That isn't going to happen.
Why?
Our lived experience is that when citizen-led groups or NGOs take over a role, the thinking in government seems to be that is now an NGO role, it is the role of that particular group, and the government doesn't participate. You only need to look at the health sector and the education sector and look at how things that began as community projects have become private, the business community has come in, and the government role and that of these entities are almost at 50-50, and the government doesn't seem to make any move towards increasing its participation. If anything, the participation is lessened. So this very participation you're speaking of seems to take center stage because people can't sit idly and just watch things going
I
wrong.
don't think so. You know, one of the objects of devolution is to enable citizens to manage their own affairs. So already you are recognizing that citizens should manage their own affairs. And as long as citizens are empowered to manage their own affairs, then government will come and provide for what the citizens want. So it's possible to have citizens driving their own development and government providing what the citizens want.
The counties that you work in, how many counties? You said 22, you said?
That's 7.
37. See, me, I was giving a discount of 22. Tell me which of these counties, how many of them are able to do the very thing you're saying they're supposed to do? We're going to 10 years. They're able to run their own affairs effectively. The citizens are able to benefit from these billions of shillings that they get effectively. Mention a few that have managed to achieve
on a
what you're saying.
scale of 1 to 10, let me say 50% of what the county governments are doing, they're doing very well. And we have evidence.
50%?
Yes.
And you have documentation to
Yes,
prove this?
yes, we have that. The county governments are very good plans. And these plans, if you analyze by sectors, they are very good plans. They are county governments that have provided resources to the right priorities. And you have seen county governments implementing the right priorities for citizens. However, they need to improve. So we cannot say that there's none. Where World Vision works, we have planned together with the county governments. Let me give an example of water, for example. We have designed water projects together with the county governments where we have seen financial investment by county governments, and the World Vision role was basically to complement that. We have seen situations where we are tempted to prioritize certain activities only for county government to say, no. On this ones, we are fully financing. So that evidence is there. And
that evidence tells me the government isn't doing what it's supposed to do. Because if they were, what would they need you for?
At least they've done that bit.
What we need to say is that the NGO is a partner to the government. If the government does not give us an enabling environment, we will not be able to do the work. I think you've seen a number of times in other countries, not in Kenya, where NGOs have been stopped from working.
Sure.
So I wouldn't say that the government is not doing what they're supposed to do. It's because resources are always limited. You cannot have all the resources and prioritize everything. And for us as Brooke, bringing in animal welfare, I think is very unique because everybody else is just thinking about people. And we are forgetting that the environment, the animals and the people are all intertwined and each depends on the other. So I think those are some of the unique things that the NGO is bringing. But we have to be live to the fact that we are partners of the government.
Okay.
We are not...
You're not competing
enemies,
with the government.
yeah.
Let's take a break at this point. You're talking about NGO Week 2022. We're celebrating NGOs, adaptation, innovation, and resilience. Our two guests in the studio. One is Clemencia Osaoma. She's a project development manager at Brooke, East Africa. And Elijah Bonyo-Don is the director of policy advocacy and government relations at World Vision Kenya. We are commemorating NGO Week 2022, celebrating NGOs, adaptation, innovation, and resilience with our two guests in the studio, Clemencia Osa, Project Development Manager at Brooke East Africa, and Elijah Bonyo, who is a Director of Policy Advocacy and Government Relations at World Vision Kenya. As we talk about NGOs, there is a regulatory framework for NGOs, right? It starts with the Public Benefit Organizations Act. It creates the Public Benefits Organizations Authority, right? That should license and regulate NGOs. And the whole conversation around this has had its ups and downs. In terms of NGOs and the way we know NGOs working in this country, many of them are foreign funded. And then they are coming in and bringing their money into communities. Previously, there was this whole back and forth between government and NGOs. In some NGOs come and they determine this is what is very important for us, and you go into the community and you start running programs which are either conflicting or running contrary to government programs on the ground. Has that been harmonized now? Can we say that there are NGOs that are operating in this country? The government is trying to do to drill boreholes. This NGO is deciding let's create climate things that bring water to the people.
Yeah, thanks. I think for now we're still operating under the NGO Coordination Act. The PBO Act is yet to be commenced. Almost 10 years since it was passed. So that's another pending matter. However, the funding streams for NGOs are not necessarily foreign. I'll give examples.
Not necessarily.
Yes. We have Kenyans who are contributing to the NGO funding mechanisms. In World Vision, for example, we have a program in Nakuru, in a place known as Salga, which is 100% funded by voluntary Kenyans. And that Kenyans are coming together to join us to provide resources to that community. So that's already an example of how Kenyans themselves are funding NGO contribution. We have private sector entities in the country that are collaborating with NGOs to finance community development. So already the second level is private sector contribution. The third element, we have government financing NGOs. We have examples of government of Kenya giving resources to NGOs to advance the innovation we are talking about. Then the last one then will be the bilaterals, multilaterals, and international funding agencies. So I think the funding mechanism for NGOs is not just foreign. The second thing in terms of planning, we have a third medium-term plan that is coming to an end. And then you have the county integrated development plan. So the challenge has been that, look at the word county integrated development plan. The idea around integration is to ensure that every player is integrated. But the missing point is that people will come and plan together. At the point of providing financial resources, then government fails to acknowledge the financial contribution of the NGOs at that level. Then you begin to see now the disconnect begins at implementation. But institutions where NGOs have got into memorandum understanding by government, then you're able to see lack of duplication. So to sort out the duplication is a matter of everyone has to comply to one plan. Everyone has to comply to one implementation framework. As long as you are part of the project implementation, then you have another team of NGOs and must not necessarily be in the planning team, but should be providing oversight and accountability.
You know, Bonyo, here the way you're painting the picture is as if NGOs are these angels who want to do good, and government are these people who are just politicians who will try at one point or the other to frustrate efforts of everybody else who's coming to work with the community and their voters. Is that really the case? Are there no NGOs that are seeking to have their own autonomy in? Yes, there is CIDP, we are plugging in, but we do not want to be asked any questions by anybody else.
Why you have the regulator, the NGO Coordination Board, is to ensure that NGO comply to certain regulations. And NGOs are registered. And every year, NGOs are supposed to provide evidence of what they did in this country through what we call annual returns. The challenge is close to 60% of NGOs are not doing that. If you look at the NGO reports for the previous year, averagely, I think about 30% of NGOs are providing returns. So what we should be interrogating, why are certain NGOs not providing returns? One of the reasons is they didn't attract funding to implement certain activities. But even if you didn't get funding to implement activities, you're supposed to provide zero returns. I just indicate we never implemented. Yes, the accountability concerns in the NGO sector, and that needs to be addressed. The same standards for holding government accountable are the same standards for holding NGO accountable. Accountability standards are no different. So I agree with you, we have to hold government accountable as NGOs, but equally we must also demonstrate accountability to the citizens and to the government ourselves.
Don't you think government is comfortable, or gets comfortable, when we see the activity of NGOs within whatever country we're talking about, to say that there will always be an NGO who will come up and who will take this responsibility? I'll give you an example. If there's an NGO who comes into the country and is taking care of blood matters, for example, all right? And we said that they've done this for the last donkey years, no pun intended. And then after some time, the funding runs out. Government has seen that this is easy, that somebody can come in and take the responsibility. All we need to do is look for somebody else who is willing to do it. So for me, it creates an over-reliance on these bodies, whereby even if there was something you could do about it, you're not going to be creative in your thinking, because you will know that I can call on Obonyo today, I can call on Clemencia tomorrow, and they will be able to sort out my issues. I don't have to be creative as government. I don't even have to think, because all I have to do is throw a stone and it will land on somebody who will give me the much needed resources or the expertise or the manpower. I don't even have to think. It'll be there. So is it a crutch or is it help?
It's a yes and no. It's a yes and no. It's a yes because depending on the methodology and implementation models that the NGO is using, it can go either way. So if an organization is aiming at sustainability, it means they work very closely with the government. They do a lot of technology transfer and capacity building and enhancing the goods that they are achieving, and doing a lot of evaluations and monitoring and assessments with the government and verification of things that are being produced, the goods, the outputs and the outcomes. Because, for example, if you're working in our sector, the animal welfare, and you're talking about body condition scores of animals, there is a level that those body condition scores, when they reach there and the communities have the appropriate attitudes, then they are able to sustain them. And if you're working with the government, for example, if the director of veterinary services are there and the veterinary board are the ones who are regulating veterinary practice, then they are able to sustain that.
Right.
Now, if you're working with, let's say, human rights is very challenging because sometimes you find the very government that is supposed to protect is the one that is being accused of the human rights issues. So in that case, it could be very difficult, especially if the government is seen to have had a hand. I'm not saying the government does that. So we cannot say that it is either or, but it depends on the models and it depends also on the vision of the organization. If the NGO wants sustainability, then the government cannot be reliant on them. Then there will also be a mechanism of prioritizing needs and ensuring that they reach a certain acceptable level.
Right.
Once they reach the acceptable level, what the government needs to do is just to make sure that they maintain it at that level. For example, let me just
Go ahead.
finish.
Yeah.
The issue about women and men, I think you've had a lot of organizations trying to ensure that the 2/3 gender rule is implemented, and it has not been implemented.
No.
So let's say it gets to a point where it is implemented. I don't think it will be easy to go back on it.
Let me frame this, maybe ask a question differently. And also for you, Obonyo, as well. Do you think that without the contribution, for example, for work animals that has happened in the country over the last 10 years, do you think that we would be able to talk about some of the gains that we've seen in the protectionism of animals, for example? Without the contribution that has been made for children, would we see this 30 billion, 60 billion shillings going towards education for children as it has been in the last 10 years?
I think that's a history question. You know, who's government and who's non-government? Ideally, it's citizens that put together the government. And some of the reasons why, for a long period of time, we can't say that government has done it all, and therefore we have to acknowledge that the contribution of NGOs is a history of government failure. It's a history of government poor planning, poor budgeting, and of course, corruption-related matters. So we can confidently say that over the last several years, NGOs have made a substantial contribution, and without NGOs, then government would have not achieved what it has achieved. That is the reality. But moving forward, we need to appreciate that everything NGOs are doing is a responsibility of government. Look at the human rights NGOs, for example. It's the responsibility of government to educate citizens on their rights. It's the responsibility of government to provide civic education. Now, government has not prioritized certain human rights-related activities. That's why NGOs are doing it. If you read our constitution very well, human rights, let me say, ensuring citizens get their rights begins by enabling citizens to understand their own rights. Government should do that. But governments world over are not careful to do that. And therefore, NGOs are saying, we're going to do it if government has not done it. But if you've got a good government, the government will begin by teaching their own citizens on their entitlements. Government will begin by ensuring that citizens hold it accountable. It could be utopia, but that's what we expect.
So then it's very clear that had it not been for this work that NGOs are doing, we would not have been where we are today. Is that what you're saying?
To a large extent,
It is
yes.
true, but also we have to look about attribution. How much of it can be attributed to the NGO and how much of it can be attributed to other things like technological changes and access to information? Because access to information plays a big role. If somebody has access to information about how they can change their situation, an entrepreneur, for example, can change their situation without waiting for government. So there is really need to do maybe an assessment, find out the baseline, and then move from the baseline and look at the critical factors of success. So you won't just say that it is just the NGOs. The NGOs, yes, have played a role, but we need to know how much of it has it played.
Baseline, critical factors for success, and other NGOs speak.
Can I just
Yes.
allow me just to add that government has more expertise than NGOs.
Yes.
Government has more resources than NGOs. In
Right.
any case, a lot of development work that's going on is benefiting from government technical expertise. So in terms of technical expertise, governments have it. In terms of financial resources, government have it. What you're only saying, there are children and communities who are left behind. So NGOs are just coming to ensure that all these children and communities are not left behind.
But don't you see, in so saying, what you're actually saying in essence is this: there ought not to be communities that are left behind
There you go.
if the government is functioning.
Yes.
We devolved so that these very issues would be dealt with. So that instead of talking about some huge national government based in Nairobi, you have your own local county government at your doorstep. And
Directly responsive.
that's the whole point, to bring development to you. Now, when NGOs come in and with what they do, NGOs would not exist if there were no gaps.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, if I look at the number of NGOs in this country, they're not decreasing, they're increasing.
Yes.
The registration, every year the number of NGOs that are registered, and they cover every sphere of our lives. Now, the work that you are doing, the work you're doing is actually very unique, and it's useful. But what am I saying? I'm saying I keep hearing about how NGOs work with the governments. I get it. But now, if I were to talk about Brooke, they're called Brooke?
Brooke, yes.
Yes. For there to be lasting change, this is my thinking, you need to, or you ought to start conversing or associating or enjoining with people at their very earliest stage. My pet subject is always schools. When you have such a program, do you also engage the Ministry of Education? Do you engage the Ministry of Curriculum Development so that our whole outlook towards animals is changed? Because by and large in this country, when someone calls you a donkey, you're being insulted.
Yeah.
Someone calls you a dog, you're really being insulted.
Farasi ni mbili, zingine ni punda.
Punda. Yes, exactly. So, if the attitude isn't changed towards animals and how we treat them and how we look at them and how we ought to consider them as regular members of our society, what you're doing is fine. I'm asking, do you have a plan where you start getting our people to understand the usefulness of these animals at the earliest of stages? Remember, pets, as we call them, eat leftovers in our community, right?
Yeah.
And by and large, they look after themselves, apart from the times when they eat. Now, that attitude, if you look at the West, they treat animals rather differently.
Yeah.
But they didn't get there in a day. So,
We have an elaborate school program. I didn't mention. We have an elaborate school program where we have donkey care clubs that are currently working very closely with the 4K clubs that the government has rejuvenated, and that is aimed at attitude change, and that bringing the taking care of the gap of the intergenerational, because the children are the ones who are going to be the adults of next year or next time. But we also are working with institutions of higher learning to change the curricula, because if you look at the vet school, for example, the donkeys and taking care of equines, donkeys, horses and mules are in the equine family, and those equines, they are not a priority in the vet school. So those are some of the things we've done. We have an elaborate animal health mentoring framework that we are using with vets and people in the animal welfare and animal health service provision. So yeah, we have that. It is something we have noticed.
Organizations such as, Brooke East Africa, World Vision, and other organizations are among those that I'm sure Bonyo would say are doing the 30% that do the annual returns, because they look at programs and they look at their projects and they're looking long-term and how they're going to have long-term impact. Very many other organizations in the NGO field are just very short-term. And in fact, this is a complaint that has come from very many members of the community. NGO comes in, NGO comes and says, we are going to do this thing. It's a 3-year project. At the end of the 3 years, they fold, they go. What they were doing, community will tell you there was an NGO that was doing something here. We no longer are able to access what they were doing.
and we don't have the results of what it is that they were doing, whatever they said they were coming to find
They
out.
did not even build our capacity so we can take over. So that whole issue of long-term sustainability of projects is lacking. What can we do to make sure that everything that an NGO is doing today, we can look back and say a community has been able to take it up and they're running with it with the government, so that the NGO does not have to be in the same field forever.
Yeah,
Look at the number of counties that World Vision, for example, has worked in the last number of years. Would you say that you've been able to move from this ward, you've now moved into another ward, certain wards that we were dealing with in the 90s, we are no longer dealing with them?
Yes, we have to remain facilitators of development. You know, the role of NGOs at the community level, you need to facilitate communities to be at the driver's seat. Whatever plans you are doing or implementing, if you don't enable children and communities to lead those processes, then the community is going to complain you came and went. But if you went to a community and started the process together with the community and their leaders, it means you are one of the partners in that community. You are not the leader in that community. So the only solution that I'm calling for, there are a lot of innovation in other wards or counties, as you said, that have worked. Community planning, we have to move away from the top level planning and get back to community plan owned by community themselves. And in that community plan, they're able to show government contribution, NGO contribution, and community-owned contribution. And then you need to have regular community accountability platforms, maybe monthly or quarterly, where communities are holding NGOs and governments together accountable. If we enable communities to lead the development and hold governments and NGOs accountable, this problem is going to be solved. Thank you.
And critically, I think maybe, and this is something that CT talks about all the time, making sure that there is conversation with the community to know we are here for 3 years. After 3 years, we'll have brought you to this level. You take over thereafter. Because I think, CT, you'll say, very many times, the community did not even know that you guys were going. They didn't know that your program is a 5-year program.
Yeah.
So at the end of the 5 years, you fold up, you leave, and everybody's left wondering, but we're working so well with these people.
You know what is the real shocker here is that even when you have funders at the governmental level, national governmental level, and you know, for instance, the time space within which the program will actually operate. Let's say, for instance, PEPFAR, okay? Somehow, these are very, very detailed people. They tell you, you've got this. Every year you're reminded to the point where you have 3 months to go. 3 months lapse. and when the individuals who are responsible for that particular are asked, it's like they're shocked.
They also are shocked like you.
Yes. No
What?
plans were made. I mean, we
You
saw
mean-
it
you mean
happening.
it's over?
Yeah,
What do you mean it's over?
We saw it with the blood donation agencies. And it's like, but you knew this was coming to an end. Why didn't you guys plan for it? They didn't put it in the budget. So you wonder, what do you mean they didn't put it in the budget? And you knew very well that come this date, this was coming to an end.
Yeah.
That's the dependency that Ndu was talking about. As for this 30% you speak of, Eric, there are funders who require the people they fund to send returns. They want you to see the returns you've taken to the agency within your country that is responsible for oversight, and they also want the same. Now, there are others who don't require that. And if they don't, then people will not send returns. But even significantly, the NGO Coordinating Council, do they even have the human resource to cover all the
look
NGOs
at
that
all
we
the
have in the
returns?
country? The answer is no, they don't.
I agree with you. They don't, and the recommendation we are giving this morning, there's need to increase investment on the NGO Coordination Bureau for them to do their job. As it is now, they're not in communities. They're just at some regional and national level. So to ensure NGO compliance and proper regulations are implemented, there's need for investments in human resources in the NGO coordination boards to ensure accountability in all corners of the country.
Why has the law not been operationalized?
I think for me it's a political issue. Laws are made in parliament, and when laws have been made, then the executive have a responsibility to implement the law. And the question is, why is the executive not implementing the law? It's a political question.
Why are
And,
the
it
NGOs
will
not
take-
pushing for the implementation of
We've
the law?
done that. We did done that for a long time. We've had conversations with the executive. We've had conversations with the legislature. We are still stuck. The reasons as to why you are stuck are political. And I think the right moment for solving that problem, in my view, might probably be after elections. Right now, the mood in the country, no one is going to listen to that. Perhaps after elections, we can revisit the PBO Act.
Maybe this is actually the time to do
It
that.
is the
Yes.
time.
You
You have
go
a
and-
captive audience right now.
and get them to commit publicly.
The
Commit to
prioritization,
implementation of this.
prioritization right now, it might be the right time, but it's going to take a lot of miracles for it to be on the table.
Actually, politicians during election time are vulnerable.
Yeah.
they are willing to listen. They are willing to take into account things ordinarily they wouldn't. The moment they get elected,
They're even willing to listen in a manner in which they wouldn't once they're in
right
office.
now.
And they'll make commitments.
When they're elected, what do they need you for? They already
they
already
move on.
Waishimiwa. I mean, what is everything will be on their terms.
Oh, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. And happy NGO Week 2022 with all the work that you've been doing in the communities. I've gotten a comment here from Elijah who says, now going forward, when someone calls you Punda Wewe, feel honored.
The right of the animal.
Feel honored.
From Brooke.
Punda Wewe. Clemencia Osa is a project development manager at Brooke, East Africa, and Elijah Bonyo is the director, policy, advocacy, and government relations at World Vision Kenya.